I'm not at all in accord with this business of making me a classic of French painting. In the first place, because of my resistance to be an artist as artists are made of today. And the word artist also is a conception that I tried to get out of in the first place.
But you do perhaps find it a little gratifying to be thought of among such exalted company.
Well, it's always pleasant to receive compliments, but that's not the point here. I really have no thought about that very much. I don't care whether I am or not. What I am, in fact, I don't care. I doubt the word to be.
And do you also approve of Charles Mitchell's attempt to dissociate you from Dada?
Dada, less, because as we said before, Dada is a spirit. It's not only a movement of 1916, 17, 18. It has always existed since Adam and Eve. So, if I'm not a Dada in the 1916 sense, at least I have something in common with the attitude of a Rabelais, of a Jarry, in my way of looking at life.
Ironical causality is one of the techniques by which he makes decisions. But it is always a very prim, conceptual decision that he makes.
Yes, but this can be a joke at the same time.
It is a joke, and it's phrased as a joke.
Yes, it is a joke, all right. But it's based on the fact that I have my doubts about real causality. There's no real reason for using causality. Why not use it ironically by inventing a world in which things come out differently from the usual one? We can imagine a new causality in which you invent your own reasons for this or that. Don't you think so?
But do you see a distinction between your own activity, which is a world invented by you, and the activity of the surrealists proper, people like Dali, who tried to work without any conscious effort? One might suppose that what you call a chocolate, which was something which you call symmetry of uniforms and liveries, yes, is a surrealist activity. But these ideas of yours are always closely related into a system. They're not arbitrary juxtapositions fully. You always seek justification for your act. The surrealists stressed the fact that these juxtapositions were unjustified.
Yes, I do. It's not entirely fantasy. The subconscious really never interested me very much as a basis for an art expression of any kind. It's true that I really was very much of a Cartesian, if you could use the word défroqué, which means unfrocked Cartesian, because I was very pleased by the so-called pleasure of using Cartesianism as a form of thinking, logic and very close mathematical thinking. But yet I was also very pleased by the idea of getting away from it. It happened also in several plays of Roussel, a writer who wrote these completely fantastic descriptions of the same order where everything can be done, especially when you describe it in words. Anything can be invented, and in Locus Solus and in Impression d'Afrique, that's where really I found the source of my new activity in 1911 or 12.
In spite of the fact that one thinks of you as sitting right on top of Cubism, you felt a need after just 1 or 2 years of experience of Cubism that you wanted to find a new path for yourself. And I take it that this is the way in which you found it, by an exploration of intellectual and conceptual terms,
yes,
juxtaposed to the physical configurations that you made.
Yes, I very soon got impatient, so to speak, with Cubism. At least impatient in that way that I couldn't see any future for me in it. In fact, I've touched Cubism rather little. The new Descending Staircase is inspired by Cubism, naturally. But the addition of movement in it, which seems to be futuristic, and is futuristic, but futuristic only because the futurists had spoken of movement, were speaking of movement at the time, that doesn't make it a new idea of theirs. Movement was in the air. There was something more important than the futurists for me in that case, was the publication of fencing or horse galloping and so forth, photos,
That was by Muybridge.
Yes, that gave me the real idea for the nude. And it's only later, months later, that I saw the Bala, futurist Bala, with his dog and 20 legs. And even there was only Bala and I who had the idea of multiplying the legs. But Shuni was entirely different. He really used planes more than lines. In other words, even today you can compare them and see there is no direct influence from painter to painter, especially that I never knew them. I never knew Puccini and met him end of January 1912. And I never had any real relationship with them at all. So movement took me out of Cubism, if I may say. Up to then, I wasn't sure. I did the King and the Queen after that, and it was the end of Cubism for me, end of 12. And already some other ideas came that how to get out of Cubism, and I found it in the chocolate grinder, which was completely static then, although it might move if you let it move, but it was completely a reversal of forgetting about movement, forgetting about Cubism, and finding some new way for my expression. And the source of it, as I say, was Roussel, who gave me the idea of inventing new men, so to speak, new beings, whether made of metal or of flesh. The bride is a sort of mechanical bride, if you want to say. It's not the bride itself, it's a concept of a bride that I had to put on the canvas one way or another, but it was more important that I should have thought of it in words, in terms of words, before I actually drew it. What a glass does represent is not a copy of a bride in best clothes or otherwise. Yet there are parts that are called the bride, and the other part of the glass, which is called the bachelors. In other words, you can see the bachelors in a sort of not abstract form, but at least not detailed forms or not natural form. The same with the bride is a sort of invention of a bride, of my own, a new human being, half robot and half fourth dimensional. The idea of the fourth dimension also was very important in that period. Anything that has a three-dimensional form is the projection in our world from a fourth-dimensional world. And my bride, for example, would be a three-dimensional projection of a fourth-dimensional bride. All right, then since it's on the glass, it's flat. So my bride is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional bride who also would be a fourth-dimensional projection on the three-dimensional world of the bride.
As you have gathered, the large glass has many layers of meaning, both conceptual and philosophical,